Over the next few videos, we're going to be looking at stylistic effects inside of BorisFX Continuum, including glows, glitches, and blurs. These are spread over multiple categories, and we're going to start off by looking at essential glows that we get to work with inside of Avid Media Composer. So if you're following along with the exercise files, you want to open up the Continuum Avid Essentials Training Sequences bin. And inside of there, just double click the 2A glows intro sequence. In it, you should have a series of about 5 different assets that we're going to use. And let's start off by adding a glow to the bokeh here in the timeline. In order to do this, we can head over to our effects workspace. Let's go to the effects palette. And glows in particular are broken up into a series of various categories within Continuum. There are some glows that you're going to find in film style, including our popular Film Glow. And there are some other types of glows and light based treatments within our light category. For now, let's go within BCC Film Style and apply BCC plus Film Glow onto the first clip on the V1 track. Once we do, let's actually go into the effects editor where we'll see Film Glow and head in to Boris's effects editor so we can work with the parameters in there like we saw in the last movie. First off, you have a series of beautiful presets that you can choose from here right at the side. And as I click on a few of them, just notice that there are some tags associated with them. So this one is good for text as well as alpha, and you have text controls to limit it within the effects editor there. And then once you find one you like, you can use this as a starting point. For now, let's actually just go to the default preset and start to work with the parameters over here on the right-hand side. So in fact, I can change the size of my interface too, so we get a clearer view. And a lot of times you'll find that continuum-based properties, the most popular ones, exist close to the top of the effect. When we're affecting glow, we're affecting the brightest pixels in the shot, and this can be controlled by the threshold amount. We can lower that threshold amount to affect more pixels or pixels that aren't as bright. And to see what we're working with, we can actually change our view from output to threshold. It'll give you an idea of what's being affected. So notice that with a high threshold, nothing in the shot is being affected, but as I lower it, various parts of the bokeh start to be revealed. Another thing that I have here in view is also just being able to look at the glow by itself. This can be extremely handy for adjusting the glow and making sure that it's not too overpowering in how it's mixed with our footage. If I increase the intensity in this case, not to mention the radius, we see what is being applied on top of our image. And the minute that I change this back to output, we can see the after result. Again, as we saw in the first movie, the overview, we can do side-by-side comparisons comparing the original shot and the effect that the glow has in our image. So again, speaking of popular effects, we have the intensity of glow. If I want to integrate this into the scene, I could choose a color from the image, or alternatively, I can choose my own, and that will have an impact on the glow. Now, another part that I really like about the glow is that you can affect its radius altogether, or alternatively, we could just affect it on one axis. So in this case, I'm actually going to lower the radius on the x-axis. So right now, if I increase the radius to just be y, notice how it's being spread up and down across this bokeh. As I continue to increase the radius here, it will make it longer just in one direction versus have it be affected in both X and Y. Again, with our properties here, we can always reset them by just simply clicking on the icon to the right of a given value that we're adjusting. Now, one thing that makes Film Glow so great, not only for your ability to see the glow, is that you can have independent RGB controls, not to mention add a secondary glow too. So if I go here to RGB independent glows, I'll remove myself from the AB comparison. You should see that there is just a little bit of color separation within the glow. To see this even clearer, I'll increase the threshold just temporarily and then reveal the independent glow values. Red, green, and blue have separate scales. They're apart by 15 each. And if I increase, say, blue and separate that more from green as well as red, you'll start to see the influence that these independent glows have. I'll turn that off and now just enable a second glow. So this second glow right now acts completely independently. But if we wanted to, we could click on Link Glow Intensity. And when you adjust the intensity from the first glow, the second glow, which happens to be blue in color, also comes along for the ride. Not so suitable a color in this instance, so I'll actually change that to a red. And again, because the intensities are linked, both become affected by the first intensity value. Under secondary glow, you have your independent intensity for that, not to mention an independent radius, which could really help illuminate your image. Now, overall, this is too strong but was done for demonstration purposes. And we could always choose to glow under the source that will decrease its intensity, or just go back to our overall intensity value and bring that to be a lot lower. Now that we have a sense of these properties, you can always go to each of these presets now, such as My 2 Glow, and you'll notice that as I switch that, all of these property values update, and you can become familiar with what's been adjusted on a preset. So really red colors in inner outer glow for both the secondary and primary glow values versus My 2 Glow, you'll notice that the radius, specifically with the secondary glow, has been brought all the way down in X and is just very high in Y, which is causing this look to occur. Let's apply that, and we can see here, now it's been added to our footage. We can bypass that right here in the host. And at the top of the effect, we can see even more control, such as limiting our effects to Mocha masks and tracks, not to mention having certain properties respond to music with the help of Beat Reactor. And we'll cover that in a later video. Okay, now that we've applied this glow directly to our bokeh, let's see it on some footage here, which we have some bright highlights in it of this underground sign. And I'll just apply Film Glow again, head back into the BorisFX effects editor. And here, let's just change this view to threshold so we can see what's being affected here. I'll decrease the threshold to add more values to this, and then move over to glow where I see the result being produced. Increase the intensity and the radius a little bit. Let's change the color to match some of the red in the underground sign. Increase the radius just a little bit more and its intensity. And then head back to our output to see that overall effect. This time I'll do a split screen comparison, seeing the impact that primary glow has on our image. And now I'm just going to go to secondary glow, enable it. Let's link the glow intensity and change the second glow to be that of an orange red. I'll now just adjust its radius so that it's slightly bigger than the primary glow, and also play with the threshold. Just keep in mind that we can save this as a preset and apply it to other clips that have similar brightness values. If clips have a higher brightness value, it could affect the way that you see the glow at first, and then you just need to adjust that threshold value. Let's apply that, and here we have it all update inside of Avid. Okay, now that we've played around with Film Glow a couple times, let me actually go back over the first clip, and we're actually going to remove the Film Glow effect from the bokeh. So you want to select that on the V1 track and then just choose Remove Effect. And let's turn on the monitor for the V2 track where we actually have some text. We're now going to take a look at a really jam-packed effect called Atmospheric Glow. So we have access to a primary glow, also included light flicker. We've got rays, orbs, and smoke and fog. Now the magic of Continuum is that we could use this effect to access all of these separate sections, or there are actually standalone effects that we can use by themselves to change up the stacking order of how they are applied. Okay, let's take a look at this effect. So because this is Title Studio, I'm going to stack Atmospheric Glow onto the filler clip by using the Option/Alt modifier key. And then I am going to go into the effects editor, followed by the Continuum effects editor, where I can see so many different presets that we have available here. You can see it has an impact on not only our text, because it has an alpha channel, but also the background in this case. There is a bit of influence there with the glow effects. Now, because there are so many presets here with Atmospheric Glow, you can actually go and choose from the categories here. If you're looking for a specific type of glow, such as maybe we're looking for flicker or animated flicker, there are several presets that contain flicker. You can actually play that back right here within the viewer. So this contains both glow, flicker, and fog. This contains a large glow with a fast, small flicker. If we're looking for things specifically for text, we've got a text category as well, where here you have smoke, not to mention rays and orbs, which also have auto animating features, all working together for a stylized, glowy look. In this case, I'm just going to go back to all, and let's just choose Glamorize to start with, and look at the many different sections of Atmospheric Glow. Your primary glow here, where we can, like we did with Film Glow, decrease the threshold to affect more bright pixels, then play with the intensity and the radius, play with the color. This time I'll eyedrop the bokeh color there in the background. And we have controls for an independent glow. In addition to the glow, though, we have, as we saw, a flicker, and there are two main values with this, speed and amount. So if we set this to a high speed, but a low amount, we get a nice little subtle effect in the background. Versus alternatively, we can set this to a low speed with a very high amount will give you a pulsating effect, while a high speed with a low amount will create a more erratic flicker, as we just saw. I'll just reset these two values as we did with other properties and actually disable flicker altogether so that we can take a look at the next section, which is volumetric rays. You'll notice that once I enable that, this little on-screen control became available, which we can now use to position our rays in the scene to also work with the glow there in the background. Rays can be applied before or after the glow, and there are several ray styles to choose from. But just like glow, we can set a threshold how much our rays affect the bright pixels in the shot. We can choose from two blend modes, both add and screen, and then play with the length as well as the position and where the rays show up, whether we want it to be under or over our source. The next section down is smoke and fog, which we saw earlier. This is going to add a nice little atmospheric effect. And we have controls to affect both the smoke and fog independently. I'll turn that off. Prism, which is already turned on, is adding a little bit of chromatic aberration to the edges of our image. We're going to be covering Prism as it's a standalone effect, and we'll take a look at that in our distortion category. That's the next movie. And next, we've got grain followed by orbs. And orbs is auto-animating, but in this case, because it's conflicting with the bokeh background, I'm just going to disable it. It similarly has a speed that we can take advantage of, as well as a couple random elements which help control how the orbs move across the screen. We can enable some grain onto our clips just to give it a more filmic look. And last but not least, color correct all of this using some post-color correction, not to mention a vignette. So this is a very robust glow effect, like I mentioned, but we do have independent effects for orbs, light flicker, volumetric rays that you could also take advantage of and stack with other continuum effects, making it a very flexible workflow. I'm going to apply this. Now, when looking at our final result here, we can clearly see that the glow is affecting both our text and the bokeh background, which is desirable in this case. But in situations where you're using Title Studio and you don't want the glow to affect both the background and the title, there are a few different things we can do in our composite settings. In this case, we're going to go down to BCC Title Studio. We're going to change the background. And instead of being the first below, we'll set the background to none. I'll close out Title Studio, head back up to the atmospheric glow effect that we stacked on, and under the composite settings here, change this to background first below. And you'll see by changing that composite functionality, now we see our background, but have the glow effect only affect our text source. Keep in mind, if you're using a title map from Avid, there's also the option to apply to just the title map under these settings as well. And now move on to our next clip, where we're going to look at a very unique glow called Glow Darks. Okay, let's apply Glow Darks to this shot. And as you can see, it adds a bit of diffusion and blurriness to the darker pixels in the image, similar to how Film Glow affects the brighter pixels. Because Glow Darks can also be great for adjusting skin tones and adding some diffusion to the shot. To see how we can affect this, let's go into our effect mode, our effects editor here. And you'll notice at the top of the effect, we can actually view the matte, which is what parts of the image the glow is affecting. Again, the darker pixels. If you adjust the position, you can see here that by shifting this, I can target more of the skin tones of my subject here. So let's do that. And I'm just going to view the output so that you can see that huge change. And the next thing I'm going to do is target the range. And you'll see by bringing down the range amount here, I'm now limiting the glow darks to just affect more for skin and less at the outdoors. Last but not least, we can blur our matte. It's always a good idea just to go back up to the top of the effect and change the view over to matte to see what's being affected. I'll go back here to view the output and again to target the range just a little bit more. Now we can go even farther with this, where if I twirl up the glow properties and the color correction properties, we can see a section just above glow called Mocha Mask and Track. While we're going to be covering this in more detail in a later movie, I'm just going to reveal the Pixel Chooser properties. As in it's here, if I turn Pixel Chooser on, that we can limit the glow darks to specific color pixels within the shot. This will be combined with the glow darks matte. Now, in order to see what Pixel Chooser, how we're going to limit this, we can view the matte mask here. But before we do, I'm actually going to head over to the matte section where we have a bunch of channels and we could choose to just target the red channel. I'll just view the matte here. You can see there that it is somewhat limiting it to the subject's face. And we could combine that even with shapes. So on one end, we've got it limited to the red channel, but let me also just add a circle shape to the image. Here with the circle shape, change the scale, and then reveal the mask center parameters to get this more just directly on the skin that we want to affect. And make sure that she doesn't travel too much outside of that mask. And once that's applied to our liking here now, we can see the glow darks is only affecting that region. The options for masking possibilities with shape masks, not to mention limiting an effect to a specific color range, gives a very versatile workflow. If you're curious about this, check out the chapter on Mocha tracking and masking, which goes into Pixel Chooser and other workflows like this in more detail. Okay, last but not least, we can't not talk about lens flares. And there are several different types of lens flares that you can choose from in the Continuum collection. In my BCC lights category, which is already selected, is a BCC plus lens flare effect, which I'm going to apply onto the last clip here in the timeline. And then I'm going to open up the effects editor. One of the magical things about lens flare here is that if we go inside of the effects editor, we've got several presets to choose from. We've got on-screen controls similar to rays that we saw with Atmospheric Glow, where we can change the center of the lens flare, not to mention its pivot point. And just look at all of these presets that are available to us. There are some that are stylized and also examples of suns here that we've just added to the collection. And based on the actual view in our properties list, it's set to flare. We set that to output. We can see how it integrates into our shot. And of course, we can bring down its brightness as well as adjust it on screen to taste. Another good thing about lens flares is that we can occlude it in certain areas based on how bright or dark something is in the shot. We can also make our lens flare flicker, and with this preset, it is already flicker. We can see a little bit of motion to that lens flare based on the amount and the speed. Last but not least, every single component of this lens flare can be manipulated. So if we head to the top of the effect, there is a button here called Edit Flare, which will bring us into another portal, but specifically for designing or adding individual elements to our lens flare. So we've got hotspots, spikes, random spikes, and polygons, which is what makes this lens flare up. And if you click the lightning bolt next to any of these, we can turn that specific component / element on and off. If we wanted to add more elements, there are several available here at the bottom, including chroma rings, which I'll just double click, and that gets added to the lens flare. And we have individual values here, which we can tweak in order to maybe see the chroma a bit better. And I'll just reposition it, so hopefully you can see it over there on the left edge right now. Play with its scale and its brightness so you can see that just a bit better too. And the changes we make in the lens flare designer will carry over all the way to Avid from our effects editor back into our host. All right, so we've covered quite a lot of glows in part A. We started taking a look at Film Glow, how we could easily adjust the threshold so that would maximize how many bright pixels could be affected in the shot. We then changed and played with the intensity, followed by the radius, and saw how we could add a secondary glow by simply enabling it. Taking this knowledge, we then went over to Atmospheric Glow and saw one that had several different sections that we could play with. Light flicker, not to mention rays, and a primary glow mixed with smoke and fog and orbs to give you a really combined effect. We then took a look at Glow Darks and how that affected the darker areas of the image, and how this could be used in the color correction and image restoration process. And last but not least, we looked at lens flares and also adjusting the individual components of a lens flare and some of the auto animating features. Continuing our journey with stylistic effects, the next section is about distortion effects, and we're going to take a look at that in the next movie.